Hi, my name is Nick Dikas, and I'm a financial aid counselor at the University of Oregon. This is a presentation about understanding financial aid and scholarships. I really wish that I could be with you in person to deliver this presentation and to answer all of your questions. But since that's not possible right now, I appreciate that you decided to take the time to watch this video. So I'm a financial aid counselor, which means that my job is to demystify the financial aid process for students and families so that you know what the costs of college are and what options there are to pay for it, and make that as easy as possible for you. In this video, we'll talk about what financial aid is. We'll talk about how to get financial aid. What applications do you need to complete and when? We'll talk about the different types of financial aid that are available to students. Can you think of a couple now? We'll talk about some aid options that might not be on top of mind right now. We'll talk about cost of attendance. What does it actually cost to go to different types of schools, including the University of Oregon? And I'll provide some tips to you so that you know what you can be doing right now to prepare to pay for college. So let's start off with, what is financial aid? Take a moment to think about that. My definition is funds provided to students and families to help them pay for post-secondary educational expenses. And there are some key pieces there. Now, post-secondary means college after high school, which is secondary school. But it's also funds provided to students and families. So funds can mean a lot of different things. And students and families mean that some types of financial aid are in the name of the student and some are in the name of their parent. The goal of all types of financial aid is to make college more accessible for families. There's merit-based financial aid, which you earn through your achievements. There's also need-based financial aid, which is available if you have high financial need, if you have low income, for example. So all of this combines to make college more accessible. So what are the main applications for financial aid? I bet you know a short word and acronym for the main federal application, and that's the FAFSA. FAFSA stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. And I underline free because you don't need to pay anybody to help you with it like you do with your taxes. It's really straightforward. In fact, the FAFSA usually only takes 20 minutes once you know what you're doing. And there's a lot of help when you're first completing the FAFSA, which will be in your senior year of high school. The FAFSA becomes available on October 1st at, FAFSA.gov, or you can go to studentaid.gov. That's where FAFSA.gov will direct you. And for the 2021 to 22 academic year, it's going to ask for your 2019 tax information. So parents, that's going to be your taxes. For students, if you worked in 2019, it'll be your tax information as well. So that should be the most recent tax year's information that's on file when the FAFSA becomes available on October 1st. You can use the IRS data retrieval tool on the FAFSA to import tax information straight from the IRS into the FAFSA. That eliminates error, it saves time, it makes things easier. And because it eliminates errors, it means we might not ask for as many documents from you on the back end to verify what you put on your FAFSA. The FAFSA can also be completed in the My Student Aid app. One thing to note, if you're completing it on a smartphone, for example, this is an official document. It makes a big difference to what kind of financial aid you can get. So if it's on your phone, that doesn't mean that you can be careless. You have to be extra careful and double check all of your answers. Another great thing about the FAFSA is that there is guidance throughout. So if you have a question, what exactly is it asking me here? You just click the little question mark next to it, and it'll say, for example, this question is asking you about what's on IRS Form 1040, line 22. Simple as that. And you go to your taxes, you provide that information. Now, after you submit the FAFSA, it's going to provide a student aid report, or SAR, and that's going to tell you what kind of financial aid you can expect from the federal government. Useful information, not your whole financial aid offer, but gives you a sense. And really importantly, it's going to tell you what your estimated expected family contribution is. That's your EFC. So That is an indicator of your family's relative ability to pay for school compared to all the other students who are submitting the FAFSA. It's taking into account income, number of people in the household, number in college, all kinds of things. And then it creates this EFC. Now, you could bring that EFC number to any school. You could provide it to a financial aid counselor at any school that you're interested in attending and ask what kind of need-based financial aid you might be able to receive if you have that expected family contribution level. And please note that might be subject to verification if there's any questions about what you put on your FAFSA. So the FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. This is the document that you would submit if you're a US citizen or a permanent resident of the United States. Now, to be clear, that pertains to the student, right? So if the student is a citizen, but the parents are not, that's okay. The parents just put zeros when on the parent information section on the FAFSA for their social security number, right? If they don't have a social security number. But the student is still entitled to federal financial aid if they're a citizen or permanent resident. Now, what if you, the student, are not a citizen or permanent resident? Maybe you're a dreamer, you're DACA. Then you can do the ORSA, the Oregon Student Aid Application. So to be clear, there's financial aid from lots of different levels. There's the federal government, there's the state of Oregon, there's the individual schools. If you don't qualify to do the FAFSA, you won't be able to get federal financial aid. But you can still do the ORSA, and you can get aid from the state of Oregon and from individual Oregon schools. So this is for Oregon residents only. It's for dreamers and students without documents. It's Oregon's alternative to the FAFSA, and it's available on the same timescale. It's open October 1st. You can complete this at oregonstudentaid.gov. So again, the point of the ORSA is to determine your family's ability to pay for college. I'll mention it here and again, the priority filing deadline for the FAFSA and the ORSA is March 1st at the University of Oregon. It may be different at other schools, but between October 1st and March 1st, you're going to want to submit the FAFSA or the ORSA. Now, there's a third application that some schools might request, and that's the CSS profile. This is an application for non-federal financial aid, and it's usually just colleges, private colleges that ask for this. There's only 2 colleges in the state of Oregon that ask for it, Reed and Lewis and Clark. It's basically going to ask many more questions, and that's going to help them determine how much aid to offer you from the school. Again, available October 1st, and this one can be completed at collegeboard.org. Now, in addition to these primary applications for financial aid, the FAFSA, the ORSA, the CSS financial aid profile, there will be applications for additional scholarships. And this is where it can start to feel a bit overwhelming because they're coming from lots of different places and they have different deadlines. So here's where to look and what kind of timeline to expect. You can look at colleges that you apply to. Go straight to their financial aid website. What scholarships are they offering? What are their deadlines? As an Oregonian, you can apply for scholarships through OSAC. That's the Office of Student Access and Completion. And you can apply at oregonstudentaid.gov, oregonstudentaid.gov. There's one application on the OSAC website for over 600 different scholarships. So as soon as you go in, you answer some basic questions, and it only shows you scholarships that you will qualify for based on your FAFSA information and some academic information. I would recommend you speak with your high school guidance counselor, perhaps the folks involved with delivering this video to you, because they know what's going on in the local community. They know what scholarships are available from your high school or from a local community organization. They can point you in the right direction. If your parents are working, their workplace might have some kind of scholarships available to you. Businesses, your church, community organizations that you've been involved with. And you can also look online. Now, when you look online, there's a lot of different search engines. They might send you a bunch of emails, so create a new email address for those search engines, but never pay to apply for a scholarship. And when it comes to applying for scholarships, you really want to apply often and submit a lot of applications, especially in the fall of your senior year. That's the time. So treat it like a part-time job. It may be the best paying part-time job you ever have. I spent a couple of hours working on a scholarship essay when I was preparing to go to college, and I got a $2,000 scholarship that paid for my computer. So it's really worth your time. Deadlines are going to vary. So as soon as you identify a scholarship, I would recommend you put together a calendar that's saying, what are the deadlines for each of these scholarships? And also take a look at what kind of essays they're asking you to write and see if you can use some of the essay information that you put for one application and copy that over to the other. Now, it's really important that you're answering the question they're asking. But if you're submitting a lot of scholarship applications, you'll find some of the questions are similar, and you can save time that way. So once you've applied for financial aid, what comes next? Watch for emails. Everything is still handled in email when it comes to financial aid. And that's partly due to security concerns. So you're not going to get as many text messages or notifications sent to your phone. You've got to be checking your email. So find a habit to check your email address that you use for these. You'll be notified when the FAFSA is completed, when it's received by the school. And also you'll start getting contact from schools that you apply to if they've got any financial aid requirements, anything they need from you to make you a financial aid offer. And you're going to see financial aid offers probably around the March, April timeframe. There's that point about that. So it might be mailed or emailed. This year we mailed our initial ones, but due to COVID-19, we emailed the rest. And then compare financial offers to find your best fit. Now, you don't really know what kind of financial aid you're going to have at any given place until you get that financial aid offer letter. So don't count yourself out. Also, don't get your heart set on a place until you know whether it's a good deal for you. In some respects, the financial aid offer that you get is going to indicate, it's going to reward your accomplishments, but it's also going to indicate how much that school is able to support you financially. So is that a good decision for you and your family to go to that school? What does it actually cost? So in terms of types of aid, we'll talk about savings first. That's not something that a lot of families think about, but it's something that you can do right now to help pay for college. There's a couple different types of accounts I want to make sure that you're aware of. One is called the 529 plan. Oregon and every state has a 529 plan that denotes a certain type of tax privilege. So if you have a 529 account, then the money that you put into that account grows interest over time. The more money you put in and the more time that passes, the more you could potentially have saved to pay towards college. But the real benefit of the 529 is that when money goes into that account and then it comes out to pay for educational expenses, it actually doesn't incur any federal taxes. And if you have an Oregon 529 plan, it won't incur any Oregon taxes. And you simply put on your taxes as you do them each year how much money you put into the 529 plan, and that directly reduces your tax liability to the state. So that's a great way to save. An IDA is an alternative to a 529 plan. It's an individual development account. These are available to low-income families. They can be used to save for college, to buy a house, to open a business. And the great thing about an IDA is that the contributions that you make get matched. So let's say you put in $20 a month for a year. The IDA may then put in an additional $20 per month for those 12 months after you have shown that commitment to saving. So it's a great way to save for college, and I recommend that you do a Google search for Oregon IDA to see and to find an organization in your community that can connect you with an IDA account. Now, there's also the types of financial aid that folks usually think of when they're thinking about what do I want in order to pay for college, and that's gift aid, money you don't have to pay back. It's free money. So there's scholarships and there's grants. Scholarships are usually more of a limited variety, or they require some kind of achievement in order to get one. Grants, usually are for students with financial need, and if you have a certain financial need threshold, then you're entitled to that grant. There's also a type of financial aid that's called work study, which makes it easier to find a job on or near campus because part of the paycheck that you'd be earning as a student comes from the federal government. And so that allows a lot of employers to offer jobs who otherwise wouldn't be able to. Another great thing about work study is that you're a student first. So they can't schedule you during your class times or during your finals. They really have a mentorship attitude, so they'll help you build your resume. There's also federal loans. There's loans for parents and there's loans for students. Now, pretty much everybody who does a FAFSA will be offered a federal student loan. And then there's an additional application in order to do a parent loan, either through the federal government or through a private organization. So let's touch more on savings. I realize I've already touched on these points. I forgot about this slide, but here is again a summary of the 529 state savings plans and the individual development accounts. So what can you get scholarships for? Pretty much anything. To look at this list, I bet that you can find some kind of scholarship, some kind of achievement that you have here. You know, maybe it's your personal characteristics, your background, where you come from. Maybe you are taking care of your siblings. That is something that you could get a scholarship for if you can show that you've been dedicated to something, whether it's your family or it's a sport, your academics, performing arts. All scholarships are going to look for dedication and leadership. They may require some letters of recommendation. So get to know your teachers, ask questions about assignments, and once you feel comfortable and you've got a scholarship in mind, give them a lot of time to prepare a great letter of recommendation for you. Get involved in those activities, take on leadership roles, jot down how much time you're spending with each because you will be asked to provide that information to determine whether you might qualify for a scholarship. Write good essays. I mentioned some tips about writing good essays before. It's important that you address the specific prompt that they're asking. So you might want to ask a family member or friend to make sure that you've got a great essay for what they're asking for. An organization, especially a private organization that's offering a scholarship, really wants to select a student who's going to make them proud, who embodies their values, right, as an organization. So speak to that in your essay. The University of Oregon has some scholarships that we offer to students, and this is going to be a bit of an example of what you might be able to get from any other college. But we've got some scholarships that are automatically offered, and we've got some that require an additional application. So these first up here are automatically offered: the Summit Scholarship, Apex, General University Scholarships. These require certain GPA and test score levels. So for example, the Summit Scholarship requires a 13 something SAT and or ACT, and well, I forget exactly what the numbers are. Let me look at my notes. The Apex, for example, is a 3.6 GPA or a 1220 SAT or 25 ACT. So that gives you a little bit of an example of what kind of scholarship you could earn automatically at the University of Oregon. There are also going to be some scholarships at the U of O next year for the 2021 to 22 year that don't require test scores. The University of Oregon won't require test scores for admission starting that year either. Now, some of these scholarships require additional applications. So for example, the Presidential Scholarship, that's $9,000 a year, right? And so we're looking for students with great GPA, great extracurricular involvement. The Diversity Excellence Scholarship adds to that financial need component and ability to contribute to diversity at the university. It's $6,500 per year. Now, these scholarship applications, generally speaking, are due pretty early. Stamps is very early. You've got to apply for early admission, and the application's due in November. Presidential and Diversity Excellence are due in the January-February timeframe. So that's several months before you would enroll in the University of Oregon and start at the end of September or beginning of October. Now, I want to tell you about a special program at the University of Oregon. and that's Pathway Oregon. There are maybe some other schools that offer things like this, but we're really proud of what we do here. So Pathway Oregon is an opportunity to get your tuition and fees covered without using loans for all 4 years. So your tuition and fees, you never have to worry about those. And you get support from dedicated advisors. Those are your basically your first point of contact. So if you have questions about financial need, you need some more financial aid, or you have questions about what classes to take, or finding a job, or finding an internship, finding friends even, your Pathway Oregon advisor is a great person to turn to. And so students who are in Pathway Oregon actually graduate faster, with better grades, and and succeed overall better than students who aren't in Pathway Oregon. Now, what does it take to get this? You've got to be an Oregon resident. Check. You've graduated from an Oregon high school in the last 2 years. Okay. You've completed the FAFSA by February 15th. I talked about that priority filing deadline March 1st. You got to make sure it's in by February 15th if you want Pathway Oregon. You've got to be eligible for the federal Pell Grant as determined by the FAFSA. So that means you have to qualify to do the FAFSA. You're a citizen or a permanent resident, and you're in the highest bracket of financial need, because those are the students who receive a federal Pell Grant. And usually we require a 3.4 minimum high school GPA. We will take your weighted GPA if you've got AP courses or honors courses, things like that. Lastly, you have to be applying as a first-time freshman beginning in the fall term. So this is not available to you if you go to a community college first and take a bunch of courses, which is something that some folks think about as a cost-saving measure. But again, you don't want to count yourself out from a school based on cost, right? If you think the University of Oregon might be a good place for you, but either financial aid is a concern, cost is a concern, or you're just not sure you're ready, Pathway Oregon might be the solution for you, but you don't know until you apply for the university and you submit your FAFSA. Then you'll be notified about whether you might qualify for this really life-changing program. There's also the Oregon Promise, which is a similar program for folks who go to community colleges. So if you're going straight from a high school to a community college, you can get almost all of your tuition covered. So that'll pay up to 12 credits per term. To qualify, you've got to submit an application by June 1st and your FAFSA. You've got to have a 2.5 or higher unweighted GPA, enroll at least half-time, and there's going to be an expected family contribution cap. So these programs exist to help you go straight to college after high school. Why? Well, we know based on years and years of seeing students not sure if they wanted to go straight to college, and then something else comes up. They're struggling financially, or they've got a good job, or they start a family, and then it's really hard to get to college and get your degree. And at some point, if you're in that career, you're going to find that if you don't have your degree, you probably can't move up, you probably can't advance. So Pathway Oregon and Oregon Promise are great opportunities for especially low-income families to go to say, hey, straight to college after high school, don't take a break. Oregon Promise might be a great one if you need to stay close to home and go to community college. Now let's talk a little bit about the cost of attendance. Direct costs, tuition and fees, on-campus housing and meal plans. These are things that you're actually going to see on your bill. But what are some other costs that you might have to think about? Books and supplies, off-campus housing and meals, personal expenses, transportation, computers, right? There's a lot of things to think about. Now, it's important to note all of these costs because you can get financial aid to cover all of them. It might mean that loans are involved, right? For example, the University of Oregon with the Pathway Oregon program can cover tuition and fees, but it doesn't go towards housing, it doesn't go towards books. You might need some other scholarships, some loans, savings to help you with these other expenses. Now, in terms of direct costs, tuition and fees, housing and meals, let's look at the differences between some different types of colleges. At a two-year public school like a community college, you're probably not living on campus. That's what that little asterisk means. So that's just average tuition and fees at Oregon community colleges from the most recent year data available. Now, that's less than four-year schools, in part because there's less available to you when you're there. So when you're at a four-year school, you'll find you can earn a bachelor's degree instead of just an associate's degree, usually. You have opportunities to not only read the book, but work with the person who wrote the book because they're an expert in that field, and you might be able to do additional, cutting edge research. You can study abroad. You'll be on campus with students who are from all around the world. You'll have access to great facilities like a library and a gym, vibrant student life, right? So all of that costs a bit extra. The four-year public school direct costs that are listed here are pretty similar to the University of Oregon. In a private school, that's going to look like it costs a lot more, but here's the thing, for all of these costs that you're seeing, you won't pay that cost. So don't get sticker shock, right? Don't look at that number and say, oh my gosh, I'm never going to be able to afford this, because you're going to have financial aid to help you with that. And generally speaking, the higher the sticker price, the price that's listed here, for example, the more financial aid will be available. Especially if you have that academic merit, you have financial need, and you meet deadlines. Now let's break down the University of Oregon's cost of attendance a little bit more. There's tuition and fees, there's on-campus housing, those are direct costs. Books and supplies, personal expenses, and transportation are indirect costs. So these are things that we put in the estimated cost of attendance for a Oregon resident. And what's great about Oregon is that the tuition and fees are going to be fixed. We have what's called the Oregon Guarantee. So whatever the tuition and fee rates are when you first start at the University of Oregon, that's what it's going to be for a 5-year period while you're working on your 4-year degree. Tips for students. If possible, start saving money now. I talked about those savings accounts, right? The longer you have them, the more you'll have to contribute towards those college expenses, and the more that interest will grow. Have a family discussion about paying for college. Money is a really sensitive subject, but it's really important, especially for students, to know, can the family contribute anything from savings or from income? Or is family willing to take a loan? I mean, this could really impact what kind of college you're able to afford, and come up with a plan to do it as a team. Research and apply for scholarships. Now, again, almost all the applications are going to be open and due in your senior year of high school. In October, you're going to submit that FAFSA. That's as soon as it's available. You can compare the cost of different colleges using what's called the net price calculator. Now, every college is required to have a net price calculator on their website. And what you do is you put in some information about your grades and your financial need, where you live, all these things, and then it calculates how much financial aid it thinks you might get from that school and from various organizations like the federal government or the state of Oregon. And then it'll tell you the net price, so it's just what you actually would pay at that school. Obviously, it's a rough guess, but you can use that to compare the relative costs of different schools. Okay, let's review these deadlines. I've talked about all of them, but let's touch on them again. The UO admissions application is due January 15th, and our documents are due February 15th. So that kind of gives you a sense of when things are due on the application. The document deadline is really important because that's going to determine, for example, which grades and test scores go in to determine the kinds of financial aid that you can get from us. And then March 1st is the priority filing deadline for the FAFSA and the ORSA. It's also the OSAC scholarship deadline, but if you do your OSAC scholarship application before February 15th, you'll be entered to win a $1,000 scholarship just for being an early bird. And then, like I said, scholarship deadlines are going to vary, so make a calendar. Think about what's coming up and prepare. But most are due by the end of February, again, in anticipation of the following academic year. This process repeats every year, so you're going to do your FAFSA around October, and you're going to review that financial aid offer letter. This is in your first year, especially. It's going to be around this time. In your subsequent years, it might be a little later. Submitting documents to the Office of Financial Aid during the summer, making sure everything is ready to pay the bill in the fall. Accepting and declining the aid that's been offered to you, and then applying for scholarships in that whole time frame, September to March. So that is the end of this presentation, and I just want to leave you with our contact information because we really want to help you out. Obviously, I've talked a lot about the University of Oregon, but we're part of your community, and we really want to see you go to college, and we're available to you. We've got folks in our office who speak Spanish, for example. We want to be accessible to you so that if you have any questions, you're not able to ask them right now because you're just watching a video. Send us an email, give us a call, talk to your financial aid, your guidance counselors at your schools, and they can contact us for you, right? We really want to make sure that you have the resources that you need in order to make college an affordable reality for you. So thank you so much for this time that you've spent watching this video. I hope it was helpful, and I hope you know that it's possible to go to college. It's possible to pay for it.